Welcome to Suzanne's studio, and I'm Suzanne Barnett, your host. Tonight, I am presenting Jean Hollands, who is a famous marriage family therapist. She has had over 10,000 clients. Jean is so famous, she's written 5 books. She's been on the Oprah Winfrey Show twice. She's been on the Today Show, Good Morning America show, and I could spend the whole half hour telling you about Jean, but here she is.
Hello.
Jean Hollands.
Hello.
Thank you for being here.
Oh, it's fun to be here. Thank you.
This is so great. Tell us, my goodness, first of all, how did you start this fabulous career?
Well, I started out as a marriage counselor, just seeing couples, and then I wrote a book in 1984 about Silicon Valley and the engineers we're in. And from that, I had a lot of exposure. Where it was with Bantam, and they sent me on a book tour around the country and around all of the Silicon valleys and hills that there were in the United States. So I got a lot of exposure then. And then the wives would throw their husbands at me and say, fix him. And I would, and then they asked me to come to their corporations and work with their people. And so then I decided, no, we're not going to do marriage and family counseling anymore. We're going to do corporate psychology, and we're going to coach the executives in Silicon Valley. And that's what we did for the next 20 years. 7 years of marriage counseling and then 20 years of corporate psychology.
Which did you like better?
I liked the corporate work. I was a businesswoman. I started out as a programmer myself in 1950. So I was a businesswoman early, and I love business, and I love men. And there were more men than women who were sent to us, of course. And so it was fun to help people make changes and to understand their business, and their corporate life depended on their knowing how to live.
Of course. But I think the thing that's so great is that your personality is so fabulous that you can connect with anybody, which I think a lot of therapists are so screwed up. I do. I do. I really do.
They're boring and fearful.
Right.
A lot of them.
And the thing that we're going to talk about tonight is what are the differences between men and women?
Okay, lots of differences.
I
Lots
know.
of differences. We all know about the anatomical differences, but there are emotional differences. We're based on our hormones, and women's hormones. When we're low on those hormones, we react differently than men do when they're low on their hormones. So a woman can be without her estrogen and feeling just really, really mad and angry, and a man can be without his testosterone and feeling tired and just don't want to talk about it. So it's not a very good combination some of the time.
That's true. What are some other differences?
Well, men are not eager to express themselves when they're under duress.
Right.
I had a conference one time. I went to a conference of electrical engineers, 500 of them, and I asked 20 of them to get on the stage with me. I was presenting, and I said, all right, I want you 20 to get on the stage, and I'm going to teach you how to be there for your wives, all right, or your girlfriends. And what I want you to do is raise your arms like a duck and waddle around, and then I want you to shout to the women. I brought 20 women across from them, and I want you to say, I love you, baby. Now, these 20 engineers were all standing up there, and they were not going to do that, but they were good students, and they saw the other guy was going to try. So they all, I love you, baby. They didn't like it at all. But finally, they got better and better and better, and they would get competitive. So I really love you, baby. And what I learned about that, because I then did it a lot, many different other venues, is the wives would call me the next week or two, and they'd say, I don't know what you did to my husband, but one day he walked around the dinner table, and he looked at me, and he raised his arms, and he shouted, I love you, baby. And she said, it was the best moment in my whole marriage. And she said, I told him that. And my husband said, I didn't really mean it. And she said, I don't care. I don't care that you didn't mean it. I just love that it happened. And that's what men learned, is that they can say some things that will just make the woman happier, just to be saying it. But they don't naturally do that, because naturally to be that flamboyant, that sounds too hysterical.
And too feminine, right?
I also work with some CEOs, and I would say to this guy, Charlie Brown, I'm gonna pinch your cheek a little because you're cute. And he'd say, "Don't call me Charlie, I'm Charles. And I'd say, "Oh, I'm sorry, Charlie." And then he'd say, "My mother's the only one who called me Charlie." And then he became interested in that I could be his mother in some ways. And so he was okay that I called him Charlie. And I brought out a new little twinkle in that man. So when he would go on a retreat at Paro Dunes or somewhere with 17 other executives, he could be a little bit more easygoing about himself. He learned there was a little boy inside of him.
But why are men so uptight compared to us women?
Well, they've been in charge. They've been in charge of the world for a very long time. They've been the hunters, and they've been the warriors, and they're still the warriors in many cases. Now, I'm not saying that all men are like this or all women are like this.
No.
There are men and women who've crossed over, and they're very different from the norm of men and women.
Yeah.
Not normal.
What happens when men and women grow old, and then they have to grow old together? Jean, what is that like?
Well, when you get older, everything you did before gets worse. All the habits get worse, and you get more than. And for men, sometimes their libido just leaves them completely, and so they have no interest in sex, so therefore they have no interest in pleasing necessarily, and they just go about doing just doing the world as they see it. They want to read, they want to be careful, they want to play golf, but they don't necessarily want to please the wife. And that's a hard thing. She, on the other hand, gets older and gets more impatient. So she gets crankier and naggier. It's a hard life getting older, and people have to stop and realize, okay, we are doing that. We've got to stop doing that. We've got to be loving to each other, because otherwise it's not good for us health-wise. We are not healthy if we are cranking at each other.
Exactly.
We have to take care of ourselves. Forgiving and forgetting are good for the soul, and they are not poison. But holding a grudge and holding angst is poison in your body.
But how can you, unless a person, say, is really down and out and has to have therapy, I mean, they have to make themselves feel better. But what about all the other people that aren't therapized? I mean, they go around as you described. How did they get over that? How did they get through that?
Not easily, some not easily.
Yeah.
Women tend to age longer and better. They seem to be more, I just today heard of a woman who just did a 90-foot drop. She's 81 years old. It was not one of those across, go that way. It's a drop of 80 feet, and she held onto I saw pictures of her falling into this hole, and she was just thrilled with it. She was willing to try it. So women are more exploratory in the later years than men, and so they have a little easier life.
Do you think that women's liberation changed men? This was a long time ago.
I think so. I think so.
Too.
And I think men, by the way, I think men right now are much better fathers than they used to be. You see men carrying their kids around. They're just wonderful fathers now. Many of them are really doing a very good job. Many of them staying home, being fathers at home. And it's just easier to be a father now, I think, than it was when you had the complete burden of the only breadwinner.
But what about men who feel so intimidated by women, especially, these young women? They all look alike. They're gorgeous. Their figures. They've got the long hair, and they say, I'm just going to be myself. I don't have to kiss it up with you. How do you think these young guys feel about that?
The young guys feel a little worried about, and the old guys feel very worried about it.
That's what I mean.
But I think that women on the workforce now, women are having an easier life than they ever had before. But they still need to learn that they sometimes don't come across as well when they act like the men whom they model from. They need to be a little less aggressive and more assertive and more careful and more genteel, more nurturing, because men, no matter where you are, men are going to require, your boss is going to require, that you sometimes are more nurturing than a guy next door would be.
So do you think the woman genuinely feels nurturing, or is she supposed to act nurturing?
So I think, again, it's nature nurture. It's how you grew up, whether you learned how to be soothing or whether you didn't learn how to be soothing. And there will be women who are just as cold and hard-assed as any other man around. And there'll be men who are just jelly. They're just adorable little jelly guys. I always say to the women, if you're looking for somebody who's very, very romantic, watch out. Because sometimes he spends a lot of time in the Hallmark store and not so much time at work. If they're not as what we used to think of as responsible, stable human beings, if they're too romantic.
And that's what we women
we say we want it.
We want it. Before we
want
talk about your book, one of the 5 books, you said something about the French Prime Minister. Could you tell us about that? I haven't heard about that at all from you.
Francois Mitterrand came in about 1995, I think. They had learned a lot about Silicon Valley, he and his wife, and they wanted to have a little look-see to see how we did it here, because how does that electronics world affect families? So they came to see a bunch of companies as well as mine. They came to my office in a blue limousine with flowers all over the back of the limousine, Mr. and Mrs. Mitterrand. And we rode around to the various companies in the valley. And you know what? They weren't really interested. She, Mrs. Mitterrand, did not speak English. She could only speak French, and she had a translator. So I would ask these amazing questions I thought that I had already practiced, and the translator would sort of laugh at me and act like he couldn't understand the question. So it wasn't a very successful trip, I don't think, for them, but they probably enjoyed California.
So that was the experience.
That was the experience.
So that wasn't so wonderful.
It wasn't. I was disappointed.
Yeah.
I was disappointed. Yeah. I wanted to be able to be more engaging, and it didn't work out.
They probably needed a lot of counseling.
I hope
That's
so.
probably.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, this is your 5th book.
That
Tell
was about
about
the
this
500
book.
or the 100 women who all wanted to be promoted up and didn't have an easy time of it, because they really had learned to be more of an ice queen or more aggressive, and it didn't work for them. So we met for a couple of years, wherein they would sit around in a group and tell each other how to be less adamant, to be more engaging, to even talk with a different tone sometimes, and not to look like they had to win the world. They had to be in control of everything, and they got promoted. They did well because they learned how to be available.
You know, this really bothers me. Do you think that men would have to go through that like women do?
Well, men would not have to go through that process, but men go through. We had a lot of men whom we coached as well, who had to learn to be less aggressive, who had to learn to be more aggressive, had to learn to be a better team player, had to learn how to give criticism, how to give critical analysis without bowling someone over. So there are a lot of men who have made changes too.
I'm glad to hear that. Because I think that, I'm so glad I'm a woman. I don't think I ever wanted to be a man, but it's a man's world. I mean, a man can be, I used to be head of a singles organization years ago, and these men would come and, come to my parties, and they ultimately would join the club. But you wouldn't believe the women. I mean, they would just try to devour the guys. And the guys were, you know, it made them feel so special, and they weren't that wonderful. But I
Right.
mean, at least they were a man. But what I'm saying is that I think, especially the young women today, have such a hard time because the men are so spoiled. I really believe that. What's
Well,
that about?
well, and women don't have to marry as early as they used to, and they don't have to have children at age 26. They can wait till they're 40. And so it's not as much pressure to find your mate in now for young women as it used to be. So it's a little bit easier, and I don't think there's lots of women are just saying, I don't need a man, and I just going on with my career. And leave me alone. I'm happy.
And it's interesting because we know a lot of older people, and it seems like when an older man becomes a widower, loses his wife, he just doesn't seem to know exactly what's going on. And I don't, and some of them, I mean, I'm trying not to generalize, but some of them absolutely need to be engaged to a woman. I mean, engaged with a woman.
I think
Don't
wives,
you think?
yeah, I think wives did a lot of a lot of extra work. They do a lot of the social planning, and they do a lot of the, the health stuff. Honey, did you take your vitamins? And now there are men who do that too.
Sure.
And when they lose a wife and they don't have that resource, they're sometimes just kind of lost for a while. That's why they very often find another woman as soon as possible.
That's
Women are more self-sufficient in general as we get older.
I think so too.
And they have a lot more fun. I saw a table the other day. There were 7 women sitting at the table, and they were just talking and they were laughing and having a lot of fun. I looked over, and there was another table, and there were 4 men sitting at the table, and there was hardly a sound in the room.
They're
Now,
so
I'm sure they
serious.
talked a little, but they didn't seem to be as jovial as the women were together.
No, and they don't give all the dirt. I mean, they don't seem to gossip.
Oh no.
They'll gossip with a woman.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of men are more comfortable, like, say, even having lunch with a woman. I don't mean, anything sexual, but they seem to be more comfortable than with other men, or they're more open. Don't you think?
So. I think so, yeah. In general.
In general.
And general men are easier with women. And often a married man will want the wife to come along. If he's going to do something maybe that's difficult, or he's going to go to some situation that maybe there's trauma in the family. Come along with me, because I don't know what to say. Maybe you will.
So what we're saying really is that women are so different than men. We're just wired.
We're wired
practically
differently.
opposite.
Practically, yeah. We haven't. I think we were lucky. I think women are lucky because we have so much more available to us emotionally and so on. But men are coming along. They're catching up with us because they're getting to be having not quite so much stress at being the breadwinner, and so they're getting to embroider their lives a little bit more. We hope.
I asked you before about, do you think people can really change?
Yeah. And you, a daughter of a psychoanalyst.
I know.
I know. Of course they can change.
Well, but I think behavior changes, but I still feel the certain way inside, and that doesn't change.
Well,
so how do you deal with that? Is
I
what
think
I'm saying.
if what's inside is working, you don't need to change. If in fact it wasn't working, you were always depressed, you were always sorry, you were always abandoned, you were always in trouble, people rejected you, and you thought, what's the matter with my core? What's the matter with my core being? Why is my persona always in trouble? That person might want to change. Mm-hmm. Not everybody has to change. Some people have it worked out perfectly.
Well, I think that if you act as if for a certain number of months, years, things begin to change. You can feel differently because you know that you need to do something different.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Yeah, I do.
How do you like being a therapist?
I love it.
How come?
I love it. Because I feel like I'm saving people's lives by helping them to get out of a jam or to get promoted or not lose the job or understand their kids better, understand themselves better. And when we can feel kind of free to understand ourselves, then we're more healthy, and we can stop. When I can teach somebody to forgive, really forgive, and I say that that holding that grudge is poison. It's poison. Jealousy is poison. Let's let it go. And I can teach them to forgive and get free again. They're going to be healthier.
How do you teach that, Jean?
Well, we role play a lot. Now, a lot of people don't like role playing. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to say, now I want you to be the child, and I want you to talk to me, the mother, and I want you to role play that you're a child 7 years old, as you once were, and role play that I'm the mother. And when you do that, I'm going to give you the words, and you're going to say, Mom, you didn't do a job with me. You left me in the corner sometimes, and I was crying. You wouldn't pay attention to me. Role playing that. When you do that, when you practice those words, amazingly, you can use those same words later on and with someone else. You can tell someone else about it. It's amazing to me that when people practice talking, practice sharing something they've never shared before, and they want to share it with someone else, if they practice in the office, they can practice saying it to someone else someone in real time.
Yeah. Oh, that's a wonderful technique.
It's good, and people don't like it. They don't. I don't want to act like I'm 7 years old or 107. I'm myself, and I'm not gonna. But I make them do it, and they do it anyway.
You make them do it.
I make them do it.
Yeah.
What are you here for? Get on. Let's do it. Just do it. Okay. You don't want to do it? I'll role play for you, and then I give them the words. I very often give the words to people because they don't have the words. And when a husband and wife are in pain and they're sitting across from each other, or a vice president of engineering is sitting across from a vice president of sales, and they've been at wit's end for years, I'll have them say to each other, this is hard for you, and I want to do better, and I wish we were friends. And I'll say that for them because they can't say it. And then I'll say, will you say that anyway? And I don't want to say that. Well, just try it. And when they say it and the other guy listens, he goes, well, now would you say it back? And then I have him say it back. And then just the words. It wasn't so bad to say it, they find out. It wasn't that bad. I'll try it.
So that's so rewarding, isn't it?
It is. It's a good life.
And you've been in so many, you said you resigned from a lot of boards.
I was on a lot of local boards,
Yeah.
and now I'm in my a little bit more of a retirement state. And it's kind of nice not to be on so many boards and doing so many things all the time. My husband says how nice it is for me to just sit around and read the paper sometimes.
It's so much responsibility too. I mean,
To be on boards, yeah.
well, not boards. I'm thinking more of more of the coach therapist, because
It is.
you
Yeah.
really can worry about people.
Life is full of responsibilities. I
It
think.
is.
Yeah.
It is. What's the secret of life for you? What
For
makes
me-
you really happy?
For me, I have a lot of energy. I just bounce around and have fun with life, and I get things done. I feel creative, and it works for me. For other people, it would not necessarily work. Some people need the quiet time. They need the solitude. They need to be thinking and introspective, and I don't spend a lot of time talking to myself.
Isn't it funny how some people do talk to themselves?
Oh, yeah. Well, you and I are extroverts. And do you know that 75% of the country, of the world, are introverts? We extroverts, we're only 25%.
I can't believe
But we make so
that.
much noise that we seem like more people.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
the introverts are quieter.
Yeah.
And they're not going to, not going to jump in there. So we offend quite a few people by being quite so extroverted.
I agree. I know, that's bad news.
Yeah, I've
But-
learned to be quiet sometimes.
Well, since I've been an interviewer, if someone asks me questions about myself, I'm very uncomfortable now. I just want to know about the other people, really, truly. I don't know what to say anymore. and I've said this is not very nice, but I've said this on the show before, that I think 90% of people don't want to hear my story. They just want to talk about themselves.
I think that's true about everybody.
That's what I
Everything.
mean.
Yeah.
So that's why it's hard for me to believe that most people are introverts.
They're introverts, but they still want to tell their story.
I see.
If they
I'll
want,
say.
everyone wants to be understood. So they want you to understand them. Not necessarily. Some people don't want you to like them or compliment them, but they want to be understood. They want to feel that they're doing okay in the path that they're taking. Everybody wants that.
Everybody wants that, and everybody wants to really be loved, to be liked, right?
It'd be nice to be liked, yeah.
Yeah. And I think with people that help people like you really are helping the world. You are, Jean.
Well,
I admire you so much.
Thank you. I learned to have, I've always had pretty thick skin. And so if you have thick skin, you don't get as delicate about people not liking you or not wanting you or not approve of you. But I used to say, when I'd give a talk, that I used to say, 80 or 90% of the people would really like what I was saying, and then there was this guy over there who was frowning all the time, where these two women looking at each other, rolling their eyes, and I would spend all my energy on those two women. I want you to like me, and I'd start talking to them, or the man who was cranky. I would try to, and I found out I could never win them, and so I
Anyway.
stopped doing that. I said, 80% of the people will like me, 20 won't.
Well, thank you so much, Jean. This has been such a real wonderful experience for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I
Thank
know
you.
our audience enjoyed it. And I want to thank our crew.
What
I
a
always
crew.
say this because I just am so devoted, and I just really appreciate and love my crew because they're great. And of course, you, the audience, are great, and I can't wait to see you next time. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.